So I guess it's that time where we have to talk about Dragonflight versus Shadowlands, or Shadowlands versus Dragonflight.
I mean, Shadowlands is gone, and now we're knees deep into Dragonflight. And if you aren't, that means you're probably waiting for the weekend to get off work and actually play the new expansion.
Well, it's out already, man. What are you doing with your life? Well, a lot of us have been through the Shadowlands experience, and when we first saw the announcement for Dragonflight and what they said they will do with Dragonflight, we were kind of like hopium, a lot of hopium, because it was like very
injected into the veins.
Very rough for the Shadowlands players. And although we are looking at the beginning of a brand new expansion, Dragonflight, we had a, let's say, I would say, toned down excitement for Shadowlands beginning as well.
Very tempered.
Yeah, but that was because they said that, hey guys, this is all there is to it. You know, you have your covenants, you have legendaries.
That feels so weird though, because I mean, they've definitely said stuff like this is what you get and this is not what you get, and that definitely doubled down on that. For instance, with all the extra systems that we got in Shadowlands that we shouldn't have gotten. So now when they said us like this is all, this is nothing more, it's like, all right. Is it though?
Nah, that was the thing. It was letdown after letdown, not to mention, you know, the patch cadence and all that. We're gonna get through like how we can do a early on comparison between the two. At least Dragonflight in terms of more philosophical or more theoretical things, because we don't know yet what is to come in the future patches. We know what will be in you know, the launch in season 1 and whatnot. We don't know 10.1. So it's gonna be a little bit of a earlier comparison, but we can go in through things like, okay, where did Shadowlands fuck up? What did it do good? Because there are some positives to Shadowlands, believe it or not. Not many, but there are some. And most importantly, I believe, what can Dragonflight do in future patches to avoid the downfalls of Shadowlands? Now,
well, I mean, we can just compare, just to make it a little bit fair, the first patch of Dragonflight with the first patch of Shadowlands. And although we're still like discovering the first patch of Dragonflight, we kind of know most of the things that we're gonna do, and considering that there are like significantly fewer things to do than it was in Shadowlands Season 1, we can kind of gain a grasp of how it is. Well, first of all, we now have the catalyst, right?
So yeah, the catalyst will be available 6 weeks after season
first patch.
1. Yeah, it's in the first patch. So that's a way. Well, we didn't have tier sets in the first patch of Shadowlands. I guess like you could talk about the grindiness of the first patch. It was there, like in season 1 Shadowlands.
I guess you can compare the catalyst with the power of the legendaries, right? Because legendaries were the special gear that we were farming for special powers in season 1 of Shadowlands. Now we're doing the tier sets, which is, you know, the quintessential WoW and MMO experience. And not only are we getting those usually through the normal means of just doing the raid, now we can also have an additional chance to get them, and actually not just a chance, but we will definitely get them through the Inspiration Catalyst if you
play
unlucky.
actively.
Yeah, but if you play at any decent amount and raid, you'll get the tier sets no matter what. But this is also helping people coming on a little bit later, and people who want to play alts, which is something that was definitely not the case with legendaries if you don't count the fact that, you know, the legendary recipe was account bound, but you still had to grind the actual thing, the mats.
Yeah, I guess like when you talk about the first patch or season of an expansion, you know, the impact is usually based on, you know, what you see, what you hear, you know, and everything you interact with around those, okay? So in Shadowlands first time, you know, the Covenant zones were pretty awesome. Some stories were good and whatnot. The biggest problem was the Maw, like when you had to go in there and start farming your Stygia and stuff. And, you know, speaking about the legendaries, yeah, you had to go to Torghast and all of that, especially if you had multiple characters. Dragonflight doesn't have like any extra, you know, zones that you have to go in and be tortured to death. Yeah, I have to remember in Shadowlands, in the Maw, I don't know how many of y'all remember, and Sunshade, you know, our editor and head of research, pointed this out because I forgot. Dude, it was the fact they wanted to make it like hard and punishing, but what they actually did with the first iteration of the Maw is just kill whatever pleasure you could ever have in that.
Yeah, it's because
you couldn't mount. You couldn't hide anywhere, you couldn't AFK or anything, and everything was after you non-stop. It was just a pain.
I think that this is the problem, and we can talk about the issues that Shadowlands had with these systems and why we won't see this in Dragonflight, is because I'm not like fundamentally opposed to that kind of difficulty, but it was definitely not rewarding. Because if you would have gone like massive amounts of gold or guaranteed legendaries or some like cool ass mount or a transmog, that would have been fun. It's like, oh man, I died 10 times, but I finally got the tier set right. But you just got Stygia, and you lost Stygia whenever you died, right?
Yeah.
So that's, I guess they said it, or they kind of implied it, they wanted to make it like a Dark Souls type thing, but this is not a Dark Souls-like game, although...
That will never work in an MMO.
Yeah, it was exciting at first, but they didn't execute it properly, and it's the same thing with the Torghast, because you might say that, oh, but, you know, farming mats in Torghast is nothing different than farming the base item to use the catalyst on and transform it into the tier set, but the difference is that Torghast is a separate content that you have to do to play the content that you want to do, right? Whereas you can get the base item for the tier set or even get the tier piece by actually doing the content that you want to do, PvP or dungeons or actually raids, right? So this is the difference in how they implement stuff. If they implement extracurricular activities that force you to get the progression that you need, that just feels very bad when you could just get the progression that you need from doing what you want.
Yeah, you play what you want. This is the thing, and this is how you will get charges for your inspiration catalyst, right? You just play, whether it's dungeons or raids or arenas or whatever. You have the freedom to do what you want, as opposed to, as I mentioned, a mandatory extra type of content that maybe not everybody enjoys. I mean, sure, you can enjoy it for a week, 2 weeks, 3, 4, 5, a month. But after that, it just became the same old goddamn thing.
What we can do is what we thought we were gonna do with Torghast, even though they kind of said it wasn't the case. But Torghast, when it was launched on Alpha, was very popular because there was no like player power tied to it. It was just crazy and insane powers and just pure fun, which is exactly what Dragonriding is, more or less. It's just, it doesn't give you player power, it just gives you something fun to do. And sure, Dragonriding has more, let's say, practicality to it because you can also move throughout the zone. But it's also the system that you do and grind and go into talents and all of that to have some fun. And this is what Torghast should have been as well, not to actually tie player power. If, for instance, during Dragonriding you need to accumulate some form of anima to boost your gear eye level, it would become significantly less fun.
Yeah, this is the thing. If you're not tied into things that will make you grow in power, in MMOs, I feel, or at least in WoW, because I cannot speak for other MMOs, but in WoW, when you do have an incentive for some extra power, it kind of becomes mandatory. That's the mandatory you need. You don't need an extra type of content and an extra type of currency and an extra type of material to make it mandatory in order to get to that. This is the main difference, but we're still in too much on, Torghast and stuff. Yeah. But I think for the first patch of Shadowlands versus Dragonflight, that was the thing. You wanted to get, again, if you wanted to play more characters in Shadowlands, it started to become a pain. That's the whole gist of it, as opposed to Dragonflight, where, of course, you're gonna have your main, maybe your a main and an alt in the first season at the beginning, but then 6 weeks after, you're gonna have access to the power creep that everybody has, and I guess that's the healthiest thing you can have for the state that World of Warcraft was in and left off from Shadowlands. Now, we can talk a little bit about the raids, although we only know one raid and we tested it on the beta and stuff, and it's pretty decent, but I do have to say Castle Nathria was one of the best raids they ever did. That was like, for me, that was like, I was reading what Sunshine noted down. She felt the same way. I mean, progression over there, yeah, sure, was a bit, especially Sarah was pretty nasty, but overall, the team, the vibe, the encounters, the pacing of it was just really good.
That was a good raid. Okay, so Castle Nathria, I think it's a good comparison with Sanctum of Domination because you can say similar things in the way that Castle Nathria is dark and red.
I have a lot of things to say about Sanctum.
But what I mean is, like, Castle Nathria is the same theme all throughout the castle, but made really cool. The Victorian, Gothic-like aristocracy of vampires, or whatever we call them vampires, but they're not vampires.
They look
but it was nice, right? It was like dark and red pretty much all throughout the entire raid.
Yes.
While Sanctum of Domination was also dark and gray pretty much throughout. But
Sanctum of Domination was just a big ass Torghast. That's how it felt for me.
Yeah, it was. Visually, that's what it was. It was supposed to be a Torghast.
This was the main problem, I feel, and I think a lot of people felt the same way. Maybe they didn't consciously thought about it or whatever, but like, after coming out of so much grind and feeling so much pressure for doing Torghast, to go into a raid which looks like it.
That's such a big... That's
Jesus.
Because if you think about it, the concept of it is not bad, that it's just that is one big Torghast, but the problem that Torghast by itself was so bad it just made Sanctum feel
It
worse.
felt worse. But we had cool fights.
Yeah, Painsmith was
was really fun.
my favorite fight.
100%.
Sanctum.
Yeah, there was a lot of, but the thing is, and again, I have to reference Sunshade. She made good points here. Sunshade is also our guild leader, our raid leader as well. So she has a lot of hands-on on stuff like mythic progression, all the raids. So in terms of like the pacing of Sanctum, man, it was way off. I mean, you had Painsmith, which was like one of the hardest encounters and was like middle of the package. Then you had Kill Tuzad, who was like the last boss before Sylvanas, right? And it was a breeze. So it's like, okay, you make it giga hard in the middle of the progression, then you go almost to the end, and that's super easy. Then it was a mess. I felt like the power creep and going through like all of the bosses, it was ping pong at best. Plus, you cannot forget like the race to world first year.
Yeah, I mean, and even during the Hall of Fame progression, a lot of guilds stopped playing on Painsmith. It was the guild destroyer boss.
Guild breaker, yeah.
And I feel like they could have done just a much better job with Sanctum by just adding animal powers
Sanctum
all
shit.
throughout the raid.
I don't like it.
That would have been a more fun experience, and it would have been more Torghast. You just have animal powers all throughout the raid.
Yeah.
But that is Sanctum, and it's kind of similar.
Vault of the Incarnate, we don't know. I mean, we cannot compare it yet. What we tested on beta was still testing grounds. Overall, it felt pretty good. The bosses were really interesting and cool. I didn't feel there was a lot of pacing issues, although we did test out like one boss that was at the end and two bosses down from the middle, so we don't really know the flow of it. But from what we gathered on other folks testing it like all throughout, it seems a lot better at least than Sanctum. So that's a positive.
Yeah, we'll see exactly how tuning is, because tuning can be very important, and probably the best example.
Coming out of Sepulchre,
yeah,
tell me about it.
Sepulchre, dude. Like, if you remember, I don't know if you've been on the Halandrus progression fight that we did with the guild.
I catch one fight, then I was off on holiday.
The level of the fight that we had, as opposed to people who played it in the first month, is like night and day. Like, it's so easy. The amount of nerfs that Halandrus and subsequently all the other raid bosses have gotten in Sepulchre were crazy big nerfs. So that's where the tuning came in. I don't know if they didn't have enough people to test it, or enough feedback, or enough people to actually tune it. But I mean, Sepulchre came at a rough time. They're probably already working deep into Dragonflight at that time, whenever they were probably testing. So I think they were, I might be wrong, you might know better than this, but I think they were like mid-hiring a lot of people during Sepulchre progression.
That was like the transition from 9.15 all the way into 9.2 was a pretty big one for them, as they were like, changing philosophies, changing the ship, the whole direction. Cannot forget the whole scandal of summer 2021 and all of that. So that was like, the changing of gears, and that was the period, right? 9.15 and 9.2 transitioning to that, and then, laying the ground up for what will become Dragonflight, while we are playing right now. But yeah, so that was like the biggest thing. Now, in terms of like immersion and how connected you feel to World of Warcraft, not everybody fucks with this. Okay, you can be a fan of the story, or you can just be a fan of the gameplay elements. It's all cool. We're like, because of Shadowlands, we didn't really care too much about the story, because in our opinion, it was pretty shit. However, we cannot deny the fact that we did not feel immersed. We did not care about the characters. We basically felt like we were actually, I don't know about you, but I think we can talk for the both of us here. We were playing it for the sake of we still love doing Mythic Plus, we still love progressing with the guild.
The gameplay elements,
the gameplay loops,
Which, okay, putting aside the fact that we already have like a lore video, which we don't do a lot, talking about how Shadowlands kind of affected the lore in general, so we put that out of the way. A plus to Shadowlands is the gameplay elements. However crazy and the balance all over the place was last season, Season 3, and going into Season 4, it was pretty fun to play.
Season 4 was a bomb, but that's a positive.
We can get to that as well, but overall, it was fun to, pick up your class. If you had all the things, if you have all the legendaries and all the tier set, and you just wanted to either raid or do dungeons, it was really fun. The tier sets, most of them were pretty cool to play with.
Yeah.
You have stuff like Destra Warlock and Survival, who are degenerates pressing one button. And I did play Destra Warlock at the beginning of 9.2, and it was hilariously fun.
I know.
I got bored a little bit, but it was fun to just press Rain of Fire for like 20 times in a row. And I think that's fine for the last patch of the game. And it goes to show that even with that, it was still pretty fun. And since we kind of have to cross-reference with Dragonflight a bit, I cannot not notice the similarities between the vibe of Zereth Mortis with the Dragonflight zones as to how open it is, how vibrant it is. Like, obviously, we're not talking about aesthetics and, you know, the robots, the balls floating on triangles,
lots of balls
around.
Yep.
In Zereth Mortis, no, but I'm talking about the green, the sky, the openness, I opened the window and it's so fresh. It's finally some air outside from the constrictive atmosphere of Korthia and Sanctum and all of that. It was so good to go into Zereth Mortis, and that goes even further into Dragonflight. Dude, I don't know how much you've leveled into the Dragonflight zones, but the first time you go to the Onaran Plains, which is the second zone, it's like, oh my god, is this a world?
This is why I love World of Warcraft, right? This is the first impact. Yeah, man, but that's the thing. They kind of like stated they wanted this. So after Zereth Mortis, they kind of took the approach, like knowingly that, you know, people want a little bit more openness, a little bit more open colors, and a lot more freedom in discoverability and exploration.
Yeah.
They took that and amped it up in Dragonflight, which I think is good. I think it's two positives for both expansions here. And we can tie that in with Season 4. Because this is like the last season we played through, transitioning to Dragonflight. Yeah, Season 4 was an experiment, and I think it was a successful one, if you ask me. I know a lot of folks who did not play 9.2, who did not play 9.1, they actually joined up in Season 4, and they had a blast, and they enjoyed it to the fullest. But this is like the best example you can give when you have everything more or less available to you. Sure, you have to put in some time to get legendaries, tier sets, and all of that, but it's not as egregious. I do have to remember, positive thing about Shadowlands, at the end of it, they increased the whole numbers you can get from Torghast, from Conquest, and everything like that increased, and there was like a catch-up system that would go further and further. That's important.
That point is that a good point towards Torghast's camp is the Gauntlet. I don't know if you...
Gauntlet was amazing.
Gauntlet was fun. That's how, if you're not gonna have these crazy 10 million DPS player powers in Torghast that we had on Alpha, at least give us something like Gauntlet. And the reason why this is important to mention is that they can actually make content fun, right? So it's not like doom and gloom. And talking about Season 4, and I think this is a good discussion to have in comparison with Season 1, because there are definitely pros and cons to it, especially from coming from me, from someone who played the WoD dungeons, Grimrail and Iron Dogs, and I definitely played the Legion Karazhan, and we definitely played the BFA Mechagun and all that stuff in Mythic Plus. So having them back for us in Shadowlands, that was actually really fun. Plus there was a big level of nostalgia to it, and I can see how some people were a little bit off about it because they never played it, or they dreaded the dungeons back in the day. But overall, it added a level of freshness to the content, right? When you could play all of this. Grimrail was a nightmare. But that's the quintessential experiment.
Yeah.
And going into Dragonflight, I understand why people are hesitant about the dungeon pool in Season 1, which is something that's definitely worth mentioning, because we're gonna have like only 4 dungeons out of the 8 dungeon pool from Dragonflight and 4 from the old expansions. Now, I stand by what I've been saying for the last, I think, I don't know, year, whenever this was announced for the first time. It can be either really good or really bad, because we've never had this before. Because Season 4 was a success, so it could be really good. We can have the level of freshness, and in going in Season 2 Dragonflight, we're gonna have different dungeons in the dungeon pool, so it's always gonna be different. The replayability factor, at the very least, is gonna be higher. But at the same time, if you love, I don't know, Uldaman, and you want Uldaman Mythic Plus, I don't think it's in the pool, then, well, tough luck. I guess you gotta wait 6 more months or something.
Yeah. This is the thing, when you're talking about playing Season 1 and Season 2, Season 3 of Shadowlands, you kind of got a little bit bored of some of the dungeons of Shadowlands, you know, truth be told. And it was refreshing to have some new stuff coming in, even though that new stuff, quote unquote, came from the past. This was something we advocated a long time ago in one of the podcasts. Like, okay, when they did the first time walking and they put Coat of Stars over there, and Vault of the Wardens, I believe, the experience was pretty awesome. I never did those, like in Legion.
Oh, that was cool to do for the first time.
But it was like, dude, this has potential. This can be, and they went along and did it. And I understand that some people don't like this and they don't call it new content. I just would go that the value of new content versus the value of old content that will be dead forever. Where do we pick sides here? Because we do have new content.
It can be 50-50, so I think we can have a much better argument saying new content versus fun content.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's much easier to put 4 old dungeons in than 4 new ones. I mean, let's be honest, designing 4 dungeons from scratch and putting them into Mythic Plus, it's way more time and way more difficult while just getting 4 dungeons. And sure, it's not necessarily new content, but it's not necessarily old content either because it's not the same experience. The affixes are different, the classes are different, the way you interact with the dungeon is inherently different, so I think that's perfectly fine. And also, it's pretty fair to say that people tend to forget because they kind of live in the current bubble. A lot of people were fed up with BFA dungeons also, you just don't remember, and it's probably harder to remember because Shadowlands patches were so long, which made the same dungeons over and over again feel even more boring than usual. So to counteract that, the level of replayability by having fresh dungeons that we've never played before can actually offset that. And not to mention, sure, there are issues with, you know, balancing, tuning. The Temple of the Jade Serpent was never a Mythic Plus dungeon and so on.
There's bugs, a lot of bugs with the old dungeons and stuff. But overall, this is something that both expansions will be, I mean, Shadowlands did this in Season 4, Dragonflight will be doing this all throughout, which I think is a good thing overall. Once again, World of Warcraft has a lot of dead content or past content that is just laying there and could be used. And this is one of the many ways they can address this and have it make it be more relevant once again. Overall, because we don't know how Dragonflight is going to end up, but just basing these on what we have seen so far, what we have tested on alpha, on beta, from the multiple interviews. This time around, it wasn't just Ian. Everybody from the WoW team more or less spoke up about how they want to do Dragonflight. I would say that, you know, good riddance to Shadowlands.
They've subsequently, for the entire of the testing phase, they've proven that they're consistent with the awesome direction that Dragonflight is going in. We're still skeptical. I mean, I know I'm still skeptical about, you know, how it's turned out because Torghast looked good at the beginning. Shadowlands as a concept, the Realm of Death, looked good at the beginning on paper, but the way that it was executed, it left a lot to be desired. So I'm not saying that Dragonflight is gonna do that. I definitely hope not, but so far I haven't been proven right. My skepticism hasn't been proven right so far, so I'm glad and I'm looking forward with fingers crossed because Dragonflight, even in the beta, which I couldn't say this for Shadowlands beta and I definitely couldn't say this for BFA beta, Dragonflight is actually fun.
Yeah, I think that's how we have to conclude it. It feels a lot more fun. We are indeed a little bit more skeptic this time around in terms of how it's going to turn out. We can probably see a clearer direction after 10.1 hits, and I'm seeing that will become, I don't know, maybe somewhere in February or March, we don't know. But that being said, good riddance, Shadowlands.
Bye, see you never.
Yeah, it's not been too good to see you, to know you. Just go away and welcome Dragonflight. Let's make this hopefully one of the best expansions WoW ever had, ever.
And speaking of the best expansion to the Marcelian online platform is the Patreon platform, Patreon.
I was ready to see where you go with that.
Thank you, Patreons, for supporting the content and making this possible. We love you guys, and yes, Patreons are directly supporting our content. If you, dear viewer, are also interested in giving a little bit back, maybe you like these videos and you want to see more of them, check the link down in the description. There's a bunch of tiers, bunch of goodies that you can get your hands into.
Well,
if
digital
you want to
hands, of course. Yeah, digital hands. Thank you, Patreons. Thank you for watching the video. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.